You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast hosted by Zach Bechtold and Matt Franks. If you'd like to find out more about the Bearded Theologians, you can go online at beardedtheologians.com, where you'll find all of our past podcasts and other blog posts that we have up, along with some other items that you can purchase to help support the Beardcast. So we hope you enjoy listening to this week's show. Listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast hosted by Matt Franks
and Zach Bechtold.
This week on the podcast, we were kind of shooting around ideas, and we figured since this Sunday is Remember Your Baptism Sunday, the Sunday that we remember when Jesus came down and was baptized, and John was like, I can't do this, I'm not worthy. And Jesus says, you are worthy, and they baptize him. And there's all sorts of theological meanings behind Jesus's baptism, and that could be later for next year's podcast. But this year, for our podcast, we wanted to talk about what do those words, when we hear those words in church on Sunday, remember your baptism. What does that mean to us? And when we hear those words, what kind of all the feels do we get with that? And so, Zach, as we think about that, what comes to your mind?
I mean, it's a super fun question. It's a lot like, how is it with your soul? Makes you slow down a little bit. But for baptism, it's one of those things that, especially as Methodist, right, we'll baptize infants or all ages, and we just do it once. And so to come back and ask that question, remember your baptism, means a lot of different things for a lot of different people, because some folks don't, right? But it's an intentional time to, for me, I was baptized as a junior high kid, so I remember that, and I remember that conscious decision to do that. But my children, we had them baptized as infants, and so it's this mesh of, I don't only think about mine, but I think about my kids and all of the other folks that I have been involved with their baptisms. It's really this time just to sit back and think about what baptism means to me and where that's brought me this far, right? Whether it's in faith or in ministry or, just kind of that time to sit back and think back on all of that. But also, I think really, for me, it pushes me to continue moving forward. And because our baptism is this acknowledgement of God's grace, and to remember that is not, for me, it's part of it's remembering what God's grace does for us in our lives, but how do we go and share that? And so it's that constant call to go, to continue moving forward, to continue going and doing all the good and all of those things. And but this that moment to sit back and go, where are we now? And especially in a case like this, where it's every year, it's liturgical, and we kind of ask ourselves these questions or dig into Jesus' baptism, at least this part of the year, if not when we do other baptisms throughout the year. It's that intentional chance to sit back and go, okay, here we are. And where am I going from here?
So for me, when I think about this, one of the things I love about it, where it is liturgically, and then for like the regular calendar,
right,
is that it always seems to be at the first of the year, whether it's the first Sunday or the second Sunday or third. I mean, it just, I know it depends on calendar, but it is a good question to remember, how is it with your soul? And my context is, as I was baptized as a high school student, and I fondly remember my baptism. I was baptized on Halloween.
Nice.
If you're going to do it, go big. Why not? I picked a
if
great
you're going
day.
to go big, it's going to be Easter, right?
No, that's a typical holiday. Do it on Reformation All Saints
Reformation.
Sunday. Reformation All Saints Sunday. What a great Sunday within the church to do it.
I don't disagree.
But what's funny is I didn't know that at the time, but now,
of course,
now it plays into my story. That prevenient grace.
Yeah.
But for me, when I remember my baptism, I remember that moment. I remember the pastors and everything laying their hands on me, and I remember the feeling of kind of like you said, being sent out, and that was a starting point. That wasn't the end. That was the new beginning, and the newness of that for me is just so powerful. And so when I think of when we baptize kids at our church or adults or anything, to me that is a new beginning for them,
right?
And it's that openness to us to remember that moment. And I always tell people when they well, I was baptized as a baby. How do I remember that? well, we have that great liturgy of remembering our baptism in our life and faith, that you may not have remembered the physical one. And the great thing is about now with technology and stuff, like kids these days might be able to, because their parents may have videoed it or somebody videoed it. And so there might be physical pictures of it, but excuse me, it's not necessarily that act, but it's the act that your family, whether it was your immediate family or your church family, wanted you to be named and claimed by God to be a part of our team. And you are now part of our team through that baptism, to be a part of us, to help us grow. And one of the reasons why I love infant baptisms is because then it opens the community up to raise that child in the life of the church. It is the church's responsibility, not just the parents, the church's responsibility to help raise that child up into the church. And as someone who didn't grow up in the life of the church, who, I wasn't born a United Methodist pastor from day one, but it found me.
Right.
But one of the things I try to tell people and remind people is that it is our duty and job to help raise that child up in the life of the church, because sometimes their parents may not be able to do it for whatever reason.
Well, and from whether it's an infant or an adult or junior high kid, whatever the age is, that's what that liturgy calls us into, is community, right? That we are not in this alone. We shouldn't be in this alone. And you have made this vow with all of these other people around you to be in community with one another, moving closer to God. And I think sometimes we forget that, especially when life gets tough and we feel alone. But if we ask ourselves that question, remember your baptism, and we look into that, that's what we do. I mean, all three of my kids were baptized in 3 different churches in almost 3 different states. East Texas is a beast on its own, but that's one of those things. We're still connected with each of those congregations, and people in those churches still check in on our kids, still check in on us, and that's the beauty, like you said, with technology, that we get to do that. In remembering that baptism is not only that outward profession of faith and acceptance of grace, but it's that remembrance of community, that we're here in this together. I think that's huge. And I think that's something maybe we don't put a lot of emphasis on after baptism.
Well, and so for like me, Laura was baptized in a church that we were attending at in Oklahoma City. And we always still feel connected to that church. Yeah. Actually, we really more feel connected to that pastor who is on the verge of retirement. And like he has a lot to play into not only to the girls' life or Laura's life, but into my life as well. And I reminded him, hey, remember you baptized Laura, and that was special to us. And then Emily, so I baptized Emily. Emily was one of the first. Well, no, she wasn't one of the first. We had 2 or 3 before Emily. But one of the cool things that with Emily started was at the Calumet Church. My entire tenure at the Calumet Church for 4 years, we always had a child or somebody, an adult, baptized during Easter, and it started with her. And it seemed like every Easter after that, we had a child baptized. Actually, I went 6 years in a row in my ministry where we had somebody baptized on Easter. It's only been the last 2 Easters, and I haven't had that. Now, granted, some of that's been just appointment changes and all sorts of other craziness that have gone into that. And I'm hoping to change that trend again this year. But when I remember that when it comes to that time of year and when we get up to that point, I always tell the girls those 2 stories about their baptism, and help them remember that they may not, have that experience like their dad did, but their experience is just as important, if not more than mine.
Right.
And that their story does matter. And, baptism is important, and it's really the start of the journey. There are those that believe it's the end, but I think it's really the new beginning. And that's when we're named and claimed by God.
Right. No, and I would agree with that. And, a lot of what we hear, since we don't rebaptize in the Methodist Church, we get that question a lot, right? Of, well, or not maybe the question, of why can't I? But also the the understanding of, well, I want to wait so my kids can choose. And I deeply respect that, right? But knowing that we do this in community, knowing that whether as an infant, as a young adult, as an adult, we're doing this in community, that's what's huge right there. I don't know that it's necessarily the time frame, right? But we tend to put a lot of stock in that.
I don't necessarily fully agree with what this woman was trying to say, but I loved it because of urgency. We had this young family in the church, had a young child, and they were very active in our church. And she's like, Pastor, we can get that baby baptized because we don't know what may happen to it tomorrow night. We want to make sure it's named and claimed by Jesus.
Sure.
And like I said, I don't necessarily fully agree with some of that because I believe God's grace is bigger than that. But what I loved about it was like she really cared about that child that much that she wanted it to be named and claimed by God. And I think that's something good for us to reflect on. Is that how do you live out your baptism and what does it mean to you? And so as you think about that and ponder that, shoot us some information or shoot us some text or gifts or whatever, however you want to do it. If you want to meme it, that's even better.
I thought you said gifts. Like, hey, we talked about baptism today, send us a gift.
Well, yes, please.
Moving pictures.
Moving pictures. The moving picture .gif files.
There you go.
So yeah, feel free to be in conversation with us about this because this is a huge topic. I mean, I don't take baptism lightly. I take that sacrament huge. I mean, it's a big part of my life and my call. So we encourage you to reflect on that. Also go on our website. We've got some really good blogs up. Hope to have some more for the future. We're going to have this year is shaping up to be a great year for us. And we're looking forward to sharing with you more conversation, more dialogue about how to live out our faith in this day and age. So for the Bearded Theologians, I'm Matt Franks.
I'm Zach Bechtold. Thanks for checking us out.
We hope you've enjoyed the conversations that we've had today on the Bearded Theologians Beardcast, and we'd encourage you to continue those conversations online at beardedtheologians.com or on our Facebook page. We also hope that you pick up a couple of coffee mugs to satisfy your coffee mug collection. Have a good day.